Thank you, everyone, and must acknowledge some honourable guests and my friends from Madagascar who are here. It's been a long trip, and I'm glad you can join us, and thank you for your help and my colleagues as well. It's a little bit about Evion, and obviously I won't read the disclaimer to everyone, but to give you a little bit of flavour about our company, we listed on the ASX about 7 years ago now, obviously not long before COVID, so things were a little slow in that period, but the last few years for us have been monumental in growth. We've developed a JV in India to produce expandable graphite. Our expandable graphite operation in India has now been operating now for about 6 months. We're the only ASX listed company that produces expandable graphite in a market that has previously been dominated by China to the extent of about 95% of global production. So we're very proud of that. Proud of that to the extent that our Indian operation will be part of our offtake plans for our development in Manary. The other part of our equation, our key asset, is our project, our outstanding graphite project in Manary. Recognised, I think, and I guess culminated in all the work we've been doing over a number of years, completing our DFS at the end of 2022, and I was delighted to open an email, I think it was on June 9 this year, to hear that we were recognised by the EU as the preferred supplier of graphite to the European market outside of Europe. Now, we're the only company outside of Europe that's recognised as a preferred supplier of graphite into the EU. So that was I guess a monumental shift for us as far as our focus went and and where we were going as an operation. It was a testament to the quality of our DFS, which was highly regarded and recommended by and scrutinised very hard by the EU. And since that date, we've had a multitude of discussions and meetings with various officials from the EU in Madagascar and in Brussels. I'm heading there in a few weeks' time. But suffice to say, there's a lot of activity happening in the background in relation to that. The doors are opening for us in relation to our relationships with the EU, and we're delighted about that. Part of our suite of assets also was we developed a battery anode material project and a scoping study a couple of years ago for an operation in Germany. That's still in our plans. It's certainly in our plans now that we're recognised by the EU as a preferred supplier of graphite to the EU. So I'll talk a little bit about Manary. As I mentioned, we were recognised by the EU in June this year as their preferred supplier to the EU of critical minerals under that legislation. It's a wonderful testament to the quality of our DFS. We had a lot of positive feedback around the DFS. It's opened a lot of doors for us for discussions in Europe and other parts of the world, I might add, around the graphite space. I guess if you follow the graphite market and the critical minerals market globally, you'll know, not dissimilar to some of my colleagues here, is that there's some fundamental shifts happening globally around the supply of critical minerals, and particularly outside of regimes outside of China, some of the other countries around the world where Europe is really getting behind Madagascar, and that extends not only to our company, but I no doubt my colleagues who are also working in Madagascar. So the recognition we had from the EU was a fantastic opportunity for us. To give you a little insight as to where we are, we're based in the south of Madagascar in a well-known growth area for graphite production. Our learned colleagues at NextSource are listed on the TSX exchange with a market cap of around that amount at one stage. Their operation is actually about half the size of our proposed operation. Last I checked, they had a market cap of about 76 million. I think it's a little bit higher than that now. We've got a market cap of around Australian dollars, around 15 million. So we've got a substantially larger scaled and planned mining plan. We know we're in a very good place as far as development goes. There's a lot of infrastructure development happening in the south of Madagascar. There's some notes there about the RN10 highway being developed over the next few years. It's going to add significantly to our logistics and reduce logistics cost in that part of Madagascar going forward. It's a little bit about our DFS and some of the key metrics we published a few years ago. Now, I must emphasise that we've only explored 10% of our resource, and we know there's substantial upside in relation to the amount of graphite within our resource. But why extend that, and why create a mine life of 100 years? To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense at this stage of your life. So we can expand that mine life, and we probably will in the short term. But at the moment, we've got a fantastic project with some very good numbers, low cost operation, and highly profitable going forward. Madagascar, and I've been going to Madagascar for 10 years. I think I've done 20 trips to Madagascar over the last 10 years, including a COVID break. But I've got to know the country very well. It's a fantastic jurisdiction to work in, a very open government to engage with, a very educated workforce, a very embracing workforce, and I've worked all over Africa, and Madagascar I rate as one of the leading nations in Africa. I may be a little biased, but it's a fantastic place to work. It's got a history of supporting mining. People don't understand it's not just about a movie that was made 10 years ago. They've got a great history of supporting mining. There's some projects that I'm well aware of, and particularly graphite projects in Madagascar that have been worked for 50, 60 years and supplied Europe, USA, and various other parts of the world. It was formerly a French colony. Wonderful history of mining operation, which augurs well for us, augurs well for my colleagues as well. Yeah, we're committed to Madagascar, not just about the mine operation, but our ESG credentials are really critical to us. We're very focused on community development, training, improving infrastructure and healthcare, and we've done a lot of work in the background around that. We educate and train a lot of people, and that was recognised in our award with the EU, that we do a lot of work behind the scenes in relation to development in Madagascar, which we're really pleased about. I'll segue a little bit into our operations in India because it's relevant, because our supply of graphite will go into our operation in India, and has always been proposed to do that. At the moment, we're sourcing graphite from other parts of Madagascar, from some of our colleagues in Madagascar, and sending it to India. And we built this facility in India, a world-class facility to produce expandable graphite. We've had people from Europe and the USA there, and I can comfortably say some of the biggest buyers from Europe have visited us and bought material and have said it is the best expandable graphite facility they've seen in the world, in an industry that's previously been dominated by China, which isn't dominated by China so much now. So we've got a great facility there. We spent a lot of money on it with our JV partners who are well regarded. Our plan is over time that it would probably take 10 to 15% of our production from Madagascar. So to an extent, we're our own offtake partner to a small degree. So we're delighted with our operation that's only commenced in the last few months. We've had sales through to Europe. We've got very strong pipeline of sales to Europe. We've just had our first shipment to the USA. We've got very strong interest for expandable graphite out of the USA and all parts of the world, because it's previously mainly been produced out of China. And those doors have closed and I don't think they're going to change in a hurry. So we're delighted with our operation in India at the moment. Our feasibility study numbers were pretty significant. It was a low capex operation with a high return, and we're generating some really good sales and revenue now. And we'll publish some of that data over the next few months. Our cost of our capex for that facility was a fraction of the cost of building that facility in Europe or Australia. India is an amazingly cost-effective environment and an incredibly educated workforce, I think, as we all know. So we're delighted with what we have with our Indian partners. It's a great operation. Our revenue at the moment, we're projected to, our plan has a capacity to produce about $7 million US dollars of revenue, gross revenue for the JV. At the moment, we're looking at very closely and about to potentially press the button on expanding that to doubling production to the 4,000 to 4,500 tonne a year, such as the demand. We ideally, over 2027, would love to expand production up to 10,000 tonne per annum. Most of our material going to Europe or the USA, and potentially other markets that we're talking to as well. There's a massive demand for expandable graphite, and I'm going to shock the audience with some of the uses of expandable graphite and graphite generally in a minute with a graph to educate, I guess, the market as to what graphite's used for. I think a lot of people, we've heard about lithium-ion batteries and the demand for battery anode material. It's not going away. It's quiet in Australia, but the demand for battery anode material globally, and particularly in Europe and China, is massive. So we did a scoping study a couple of years ago about being involved with the battery anode project, not dissimilar to what some of our peers have done. We're re-looking at that now because we've been encouraged to look at it and advance it by our colleagues at the EU, who would love us to advance that and look at a facility that can supply battery anode material into Europe over the next 10 to 20 years. The demand for flake graphite is growing exponentially, and there's plenty of data and history around that. China previously had supplied the global market for around 70 to 80% of the world's supply, and that supply has just about stopped. I talk to people in Europe, the USA regularly, Japan, and the demand for graphite, flake graphite, is a problem at the moment. It is problematic, which plays into our hands because the prices are increasing quite substantially, and you'll see some of that data published by Benchmark and Fast Markets over the next few months. That the pricing for flake graphite is up 20 to 30% probably this year, because of the supply channels and problems that are happening outside of China, where the supply has been restricted considerably. So we're getting a lot of demand and a lot of interest out of the US. Also getting, obviously, we have a lot of interest and a relationship with the EU and some of our European partners, but there's this global tug of war, not only for rare earths and iron ore with some of my colleagues, but graphite is on the radar as a critical mineral in the future. There's been a lot of noise out of the US over the last 5 years about graphite coming into the US. The US imports about 120,000 tonne of graphite a year. A lot of it had previously come from China, probably about half of that, maybe a little over half of that. And I talk to most of the graphite traders and people in the industry quite regularly, and have good relations with them. Some of the graphite, there's been a lot of graphite provided out of Madagascar into the US and Europe over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So with the supply from China being cut off effectively, there's a massive supply gap. So Madagascar is perfectly positioned to fill that gap. In fact, there's a benchmark report that came out only a few weeks ago that now shows that outside of China, Madagascar provides 33% of the world's supply of graphite. It's up from about 5 or 10% a couple of years ago. So that number can just keep exploding. Outside of China, and it's been published recently, Madagascar is now the largest supplier of graphite to the world, excluding China. Even bigger than Mozambique, even bigger than our friends in Tanzania. The prospect for that growing, I think, is significant. This is a slide this is some information that was made available to me recently, because people often say, well, what is graphite used for? Understand it's a fire retardant for expandable graphite. Understand it's used in batteries and a range of other things. It's used extensively in the EV development sector, but a lot of people don't realise, and I've known for quite some time, it's obviously not something you talk about a lot, but it's used extensively in a variety of military applications. It's hardening material, and it's in a variety of other military applications that have developed mainly in the US and Europe. So there is a scramble for supplies of graphite for all the reasons we've outlined here. It's been identified, this came out of a report published out of The Hague a couple of years ago. The highest risk supply of a lot of the minerals that we've identified on this chart is graphite. It really is a challenge for the EU. This was published by the EU. There's a similar report that's coming out of the US at the moment. So the demand for the product is significant. It's only going to add more to the value and pricing of the material going forward. People often ask about synthetic graphite, and synthetic graphite can be used as a substitute for natural graphite, but my message to people who seem to be fascinated about synthetic graphite and have seen the production process is that it's a dirty, smelly, not an operation that would be allowed in Australia, or probably most of Europe and indeed the US. It's incredibly environmentally unfriendly. It wouldn't fit any ESG credentials in our Western world. It is an expensive process. So we see this, and there's a lot of data and a lot of reporting around that the synthetic graphite market will shrink considerably over the next few decades and to be replaced by a natural graphite market. A little bit about our board, experienced team of people. I've been in the graphite world. I fell in love with the graphite world about 10 or 12 years ago, on the first of about my 20th trips to Madagascar many years ago, and I met a number of my colleagues and friends from Madagascar, so it's been a fascinating journey. I've got a very strong network around the graphite supply chain in Europe and the USA and parts of Asia. There's very strong demand for graphite in Europe, particularly in Germany and Western Europe. There are very little graphite deposits that are of any economic value in Europe. There's one or two in Eastern Europe, but at the moment they're problematic to mine for all of the reasons we're probably all aware of. As I mentioned before, we've got a market cap of about 15 million at the moment. I think our share price is a little bit higher at the moment, which is good. Obviously, when our EU recognition became public in around May or June this year, only a few months ago, the market liked it. We've done a lot of work since. We've got a lot of work coming up over the next few months. As I mentioned, I'm heading over to meet with the EU people at the end of September. We've had a lot of meetings over the last few months. Have been very, very supportive about putting funding packages in front of us, debt and equity funding packages, because Europe needs graphite. It really needs graphite over the next 10, 20, 30 years. They need it for a variety of industries that I've touched on. We believe we're really well positioned to work with them. There's a lot coming up in the short term, and I'll wrap it up quickly because I've run over time a little bit, but we're very close to, we like to think we're very close to securing our environmental permitting and converting our PR licences, exploration licences into exploitation or mining licences. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Our DFS was done largely by independent groups in Australia and South Africa and Madagascar for that matter. We have very strong interest in off-taker contracts for our graphite and our product. I've learnt from the industry over the last 10 years, some people have made mistakes to rush out and sign an off-take agreement with the first party they've been wined and dined by, which in my mind was the biggest mistake you could ever make. So we've kept our powder dry, to use an old colloquial term. We've got a lot of strong interest. I'd rather have the permitting in place, some financing concluded, and then around that time to then initiate some off-take agreements, which we're in a very, very strong stage discussion with. So there's some of our short-term aspirations and goals over the next few months. So that's a little bit about us. We think we're well positioned for a lot of growth. I've been delighted to talk to some of my colleagues about Madagascar over the last, I've been coming to Africa Down Under for probably 15 years. I see Madagascar now as one of the leading participators in Africa Down Under, one of the jewels in the crown of Africa at the moment, and it's a testament to the people who work in the country. I'm excited about the next few years in Madagascar. And I look forward to being here next year telling you about the wonderful year we've had in the past. So thank you very much.